because it can only lead to one thing, and that's very bad. You know what that thing is. I think it's a very dangerous, terrible thing. And I think it's terrible when we can't know the results of an election the night of the election in a modern-day age of computer. I think it's a terrible thing. And I happen to think it was a terrible decision for our country made by the Supreme Court. I think it was a terrible decision for our country. And I think it's a very dangerous decision because you're going to have 1 or 2 or 3 states, depending on how it ends up, where they're tabulating ballots. And the rest of the world is waiting to find out. And I think there's great danger to it. And I think a lot of fraud and misuse can take place. I think it's a terrible decision by the Supreme Court. A terrible decision. Now, I don't know if that's going to be changed because we're going to go in the night of, as soon as that election's over, we're going in with our lawyers. But we don't want to have Pennsylvania where you have a political governor, a very partisan guy. And we don't want to have other states like Nevada where you have the head of the Democratic clubhouse as your governor. We don't want to be in a position where he's allowed to every day watch ballots come in. Gee, if we could only find 10,000 more ballots. Because we're doing great in Nevada, we're doing great in Arizona, we're doing great all over. But if you take Nevada or Pennsylvania, and everyone knows what happens in Philadelphia, you don't have to say it, but I've read about it for years. And I don't think it's fair that we have to wait a long period of time after the election. If people wanted to get their ballots in, they should have gotten their ballots in long before that, a long time. They don't have to put their ballots in the same day. They could have put their ballots in a month ago. And we think it's a ridiculous decision. Thank you.
In case you were wondering what the whole justification for Trump's temper tantrum is here, it's that he doesn't want to have to wait for the votes to be counted to find out who actually won the election. Meaning he wants the results before the votes deciding those results are tabulated. Got it. And of course, the reason for this is simple. It's that he is so scared he's gonna lose that he's not interested in trying to win legitimately, so his only priority is to undermine the election as a whole. It's to unleash a flood of lawsuits because rather than try to get people to vote for him, he would rather just try to take votes away. And let me just say, this is not what you do when you're confident that you're going to win. What Trump and Republicans have done is enacted laws in certain swing states to not begin counting early votes, which have been breaking in Biden's favor, until after the polls close on Tuesday night, meaning that we wouldn't get those results until the following days after November 3rd. All the while, Trump is demanding that we know the results on Tuesday night, which include the election day results, which are likely to break in his favor, all before those early votes are counted. In other words, they purposefully want it to look like Trump is leading so that either they can try to litigate away those early results, or they can point to the gap closing when those early votes are eventually counted and claim that the process is rigged and that Democrats are finding illegitimate votes or whatever other BS conspiracies that they can cook up. But just so we're clear, Trump looking at incomplete results and declaring victory won't by any stretch of the imagination mean that he's won. And by the way, Trump has even dispatched his mouthpieces to echo this same warning, that the election day ballots should be counted, which they know will favor Trump, and that any votes counted afterwards are just evidence that Democrats are trying to steal the election.
There's a really important point here, George, that I want to make, is that the entire electorate has shifted. The coalitions are different this go around. The fact that Joe Biden had to go back to Minnesota, a state that Republicans haven't won since 1972, just the other day shows how they're worried about state shifting. President Trump is going to get well over 10% of the black vote. I think he'll get over 20% of African-American men. President Trump will probably get 40% of the Latino vote. The entire demographic shift within these parties, it's a different world now, George, and that's why we're trying to turn out our supporters. We feel good about it. And one final thing, George, if you speak with many smart Democrats, they believe that President Trump will be ahead on election night, probably getting 280 electorals, somewhere in that range. And then they're going to try to steal it back after the election. We believe that we will be over 290 electoral votes on election night. So no matter what they try to do, what kind of hijinks hijinks or lawsuits or whatever kind of nonsense they try to pull off, we're still going to have enough electoral votes to get President Trump reelected.
The only problem is that counting votes is not stealing an election, it's holding it. That is literally how elections work. Someone should tell these Republicans that you don't get to arbitrarily stop counting the votes at some random point in time because your candidate happens to be ahead. That is not how it works in the real world. Another strategy is that Trump and his lawyers want to try and sue to stop the counting of mail ballots that come in after Election Day. A number of states have rules in place that allow for those ballots to be counted as they arrive, even several days after November 3rd, so long as they were postmarked in time. And so knowing this, voters are casting their ballots with the understanding that their votes will be counted. But Republicans plan on litigating against this so that mail-in ballots, which they believe will favor Biden, ultimately won't count. And they're hoping the fact that a 6-3 conservative court will help them. Because for the umpteenth time, this isn't about following the will of the American people, it's about rigging the system to their benefit and then using those rigged channels to get the outcome they're looking for. And by the way, these efforts are already well underway. Republicans tried to sue in Texas to stop the counting of 127,000 votes cast curbside in Harris County, where Houston is located, because they believe those votes will favor Joe Biden. The Texas Supreme Court just declined that petition, but that bit of good news aside, Republicans will continue to try and litigate your rights away because they can't actually win on the merits. They can't actually give any semblance of a vision for the future. They can't actually run on Trump's record. So they'll undermine our free and fair election to throw out votes that they don't like and try to shoehorn Trump in as the winner. If you thought the US looked like anything more than a banana republic right now, you'd be wrong. But just like Trump has a bunch of partisan hacks suing on his behalf, Democratic lawyers are out in full force fighting against their blatantly illegal efforts. And Trump's baseless threats aside, the law is on our side. That's why we've been largely successful in the face of Republican efforts to stop the counting of ballots, to stop the extension of mail-in ballot receipt deadlines, to limit curbside voting, to challenge the elimination of witness signatures on absentee ballots, to take away drop boxes, and the list goes on and on. No matter what tactic they use, the underlying strategy is the same. Republicans want to take away Americans' rights to vote. But these legal antics aside, just remember that we have agency. We have the ability to decide the outcome of this election. What we have to do is vote in such large numbers that there's no basis for Trump to even try to cry foul. Our job is to deliver such an unambiguous, decisive repudiation of Trump and Trumpism that this entire slate of compromised, anti-democracy Republicans not only loses their jobs, but serves as a warning to any future politicians what will happen if they try to undermine our most fundamental right as Americans. So do not get distracted. Don't get worried or panicked or discouraged. That is what Trump wants. He wants you to lose faith in the process because the only way he'll win is to depress turnout. So find a family member, find a friend, find a neighbor, find a coworker, and make sure you cast your ballot as soon as you can. This isn't just a vote for Joe Biden, it's a vote to save our democracy. And we need every single person to step up and do their part. If you like this video, please check out my podcast, No Lie with Brian Tyler Cohen, where I take a deep dive into the week's most important stories and interview major players in politics, including Kamala Harris, Katie Porter, Adam Schiff, Nancy Pelosi, Eric Swalwell, Mary Trump, Al Franken, Cory Booker, and many, many more. Again, that's No Lie with Brian Tyler Cohen, available anywhere you listen to podcasts.